I'm Uriah Kaiser, publisher of PotomacLocalNews.com, and on this video, we'll be talking with Micheal Allers Jr. He's the Republican candidate who's declared his candidacy for the 50th House District seat in the Virginia House of Delegates. The district includes the city of Manassas and a portion of Prince William County. And before we get into our conversation with Mr. Allers about why he thinks he's the right candidate for the job, we're going to ask you to go to our website and please subscribe, PotomacLocalNews.com. Check out our weekly email newsletter. It's a great way to keep up with everything that's happening in your community, from Prince William County to Stafford County and the cities of Manassas Park, and Fredericksburg. We're working to cover these communities and bring you can't get it anywhere else local news. And if you like what you see on our website and in our email, we ask you to consider becoming a paid subscriber to get 100% access to all the content on PotomacLocalNews.com. Please consider becoming a subscriber. It furthers our effort to bring you local news, and it certainly supports local content creators just like us, whose main mission is to keep you informed with what's happening where you live. Thanks for your consideration. Now, Mr. Allers Jr. is a Loudoun County school teacher. He lives in the city of Manassas, and he's pointing out with us during our conversation, talked about some of the issues that are going to be shaping up in his 2021 run for the House of Delegates. He'll be taking on current two-term Delegate Lee Carter. He's Virginia's first and only self-avowed Democratic Socialist, and what was interesting during this conversation is some of the things that Mr. Carter has supported over the years. Mr. Allers actually supports himself, including when it comes to organizing and labor unions, and of course, Virginia's right to work law that's been around since 1947. A very interesting conversation. Have a listen. Give me a lay of the land in terms of your background. I know that you're a teacher. I know that you're a resident of the 50th district. But how long have you been doing it? What are you teaching? How long have you lived in the district? Kind of give me your background here to start.
Sure. So I come from a family of educators. My dad was a cop turned educator. My mom worked with special needs children for almost all of my life. I've been raised kind of around Virginia. I was always moving back from New York, New Jersey, Virginia. Grew up in the Charlottesville area, and there I actually taught pre-K. That was my first job. I did several jobs where I worked on some campaigns. I was in the banking industry. Out of college, you're trying to figure it out. And my dad was in education and my mom was in education. They're like, you have to go into the profession. I'm like, I don't want to. And then finally I was like, it is the best way to really shape the future, isn't it? I wound up getting a job in Orange County teaching pre-K. And that was the only way that I could get my student teaching certified, because, and I don't know if you went to grad school or not, but they expect you to just take off, and they expect you not to work while you're doing basically this internship for free. I didn't have time to do that. So they said, well, you can get a job and work through it. I paid for college entirely myself. And I get a job at this pre-K, and it was an eye-opening experience. It was in Orange County, so 20 minutes outside of Charlottesville, in a predominantly rural area. And, in little tiny Orange County, they were paying a fortune for childcare. Almost over $600 every 2 weeks. And that was an incredibly eye-opening experience. It was a rewarding experience. I got to help and make a direct impact on kids' lives. And then I decided to work in the inner city. And I got a job teaching in Petersburg. And there I saw firsthand the neglect, the really bipartisan neglect, I would say, of just years, where my children that I was teaching, it was hard to keep them focused. I had to break up fights each day. But these children weren't getting food at home. Their parents were rarely home. They were either working at night or just trying to put some food on the table. Most of my children lived in hotels. I was there a year, lived in the Richmond area, and I couldn't take it because of that emotional baggage that you take home. every day as a teacher. But I did what I could.
So you
There,
were in Petersburg for a year.
yes.
Yeah, and you taught there full on. What grade level
Yes.
did you teach?
I taught fifth, and then in the middle of the year, they moved me to fourth because of a fourth grade shortage. So that
Okay.
would be frequent. They'd have to rearrange teachers, and it was very inconsistent for the kid.
And then where'd you get your bachelor's degree?
JMU, and then
And then
I
where'd you
got
go
my
to grad school?
Mary Baldwin.
Okay, gotcha. And then how old are you?
I'm 28.
28. Okay. And then right now you teach in Loudoun County. Is that correct?
Right now, I teach in Loudoun County. Absolutely.
For how long have
Um,
you taught there?
I have taught in Loudoun County for now. This is my second year.
And
So I
then,
would say last year is my first year, but I didn't get to finish, a traditional first year there.
yeah. And did you come from Petersburg to Loudoun?
Yes, I was
Okay.
exploring. I always wanted to be in the Northern Virginia area, and it's closer to my parents. Petersburg, uh, it, I did what I could there. A lot of us really stood up for that community. The teachers um, input, and did so much for those students. But I was looking for different change of scenery. Wanted to be closer to the D.C. area, and I originally, fun fact, I got a job in Manassas, but then at the last minute, a previous teacher came back and kind of boxed me out of the job, so I had to quickly go with Loud.
So why did you choose, now let me ask you, are you in the city of Manassas or are you in the county portion of the district?
City.
You're in the city. Why'd you choose Manassas City?
Manassas, I think it really is, it's the best of both worlds. You're in Northern Virginia, you're 15 minutes from DC, but it almost has a small town feel. My wife remarked when we came here, I don't know if your wife watches Gilmore Girls, but she's like, this is the town from Gilmore Girls. It's very quaint. It has that small town. Everyone seems to know each other. And in Northern Virginia, that's rare. It's very transient. But Manassas, there is a culture there that I think is wonderful. It's only an hour and 10 minutes from family and friends, so we thought it was the perfect place to settle.
So you came into Manassas at a time of political transition because for years, I mean, basically since the city's founding, it has been predominantly in Republican control, from the state legislature right down to the city council. And in that all began to change in 2018 when Democrats took control of the city council, and then this year completely solidified their
Yes.
control in this year's election. So the electorate in Manassas has shifted from Republican to Democrat, and again, we saw that in with the election of Lee Carter. Lee Carter is the state's first self-avowed Democratic Socialist, and he is very vocal on Twitter. He has called for the
That's an
defunding of
understatement.
police. Yeah. I mean, he takes a lot of non-traditional stances on a lot of things, from right to work to legalization of marijuana, is right down to getting rid of the police department. And so for a lot of us who have covered the area for years, we are still, I think, trying to answer the question of how an area that went for Republicans for so long flipped on a dime, as it would seem, and go for a guy like Lee Carter and continue to go for him. He was, obviously next year, 2021 is when you'll be running against him. So as you look at all that, how do you take on a guy who has now won twice, has some of the most outrageous stances and public personas in person and online? How do you
Yeah.
even begin to take that on as yourself? You're a political newcomer.
Yes, I'm a political newcomer, but I am a political commentator with Bearing Drift, and I've studied this the changing of this area for a little while now, and you could either go to the traditional, well, there's demographic changes, that are happening in the county, especially Prince William County is the fastest growing Hispanic county in America. And you could, I think people are quick to blame it on that, but I would actually put it more in the corner of Lee Carter ran against Jackson Miller in 2017. He was elected in 2018. I really think it could have been a dead body running. I think Northern Virginia especially wanted to especially the Democrats, were furious at the election of President Trump. And there was that push all throughout the state of Virginia to kind
Well,
of
when you
get
say
revenge.
Jackson Miller, I mean, Jackson Miller was a guy who served years in the state legislature,
Sure.
and prior to that, he was on this Manassas City Council. So he was well known. Are you saying that a guy like Jackson Miller, who was well known to I guess a community for a time, maybe didn't do a good enough job of getting to know the changing demographic of his community?
Well, I would say he was also something important to keep in mind. He was running for clerk of court at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was running for 2 seats. And, in a year where, following, the base was fired up for the Democrats.
Yeah.
So
So
in a
it was
year-
just to clarify, it was a special election
Sure.
for the clerk of court because Micheal McQuigg, who was a Republican who held the job for years, she passed away,
Mhm.
and they held a special election that year. And then he lost to the current clerk of the court, and then he went on late. So he lost that special election, and then he went on to lose in November for
Sure.
his General Assembly seat. So
But
he lost twice
I
that
think
year.
people, regardless, whether it's Jackson Miller or not, I think people, regardless, take affront to you seeking other jobs. I mean, Lee Carter right now is potentially running for governor, which shows me that you're not interested in your current job, and some people might feel a way about that. So it was a combination, I think, for Jackson, no matter how well entrenched he was or well known, potentially looking for another job combined with anti-Trump fervor in Northern Virginia is what swept Lee Carter into office. And I got to clarify, a lot of people ask me, well, Ian Lovejoy, another great guy, I know Ian, served on Manassas City Council. He couldn't beat him. How do you explain that? I think it was still a combination of anti-Trump fervor, just checking, the boxes, whether it's a D, getting them elected. But also, we have to keep in mind, Lee Carter wasn't saying abolish the police and abolish private property then as he is now. So now he has grown arrogant and really taken his incumbency for granted that he wasn't saying this in 2018, but now he's straight up saying on Twitter that, and we got in a beef about this in which he cursed me out. So I must be getting under his skin. But he said that police, no matter where they are a direct threat to public safety. Those were
He
just
cursed
not
you out
words.
on Twitter or in person?
Oh, he would never do it in person. I don't think he's
Okay.
man enough.
So
But
on social
Twitter,
media?
yes.
Okay. And it's also important to point, you noted that Ian Lovejoy ran against Lee Carter in losing to Lee Carter. And Ian just lost his race to keep his seat on the city council. He lost to Democrat
Yes.
Tom Usina on that, even furthering the push to the left. And we'll also note that none of those Democratic candidates returned any of our calls here at Potomac Local to do an interview like this. So
I wonder why.
so we'll just state that fact.
Yeah.
So you talked about the changing demographic, but it sounds like you think that's the easy explanation.
Yes.
The tougher explanation is you're saying that Lee Carter has gotten more vocal and had slid even more to the left on his positions than he has ever been before. I want to ask you about election night. I'm sitting there watching the numbers roll in. I'm looking at the state. Trump's doing very well across the state. He's doing very well, and especially in Loudoun County where you teach. Now, obviously, it went the other way when the absentee votes came in, went for Biden. The entire state went for Biden. But I was really surprised at how many Republican votes I was seeing tallied in Loudoun County. What and that has led guys like Rich Anderson, who's the chair of the Republican for Virginia, basically saying the state is competitive.
I think it
again.
is.
What do you think?
Absolutely, and I think, and that's why you can't blame a party loss on like demographic change. Because, for example, I mean, President Trump got the largest minority share of any Republican running for president since Nixon. So that's why I wouldn't blame it on demographics. I really think, number one, it is competitive, but we need a message. Daniel Gade ran a very, very good campaign, especially if you look
Ran for senator against Mark Warner and lost.
Yes. he lost, but we made gains in the exurbs of Loudoun County. I think, because we also have to keep in mind in 2016, and this happened all throughout the country, whether it was in Pennsylvania or Virginia, some of those I called, I guess, Lincoln Project Republicans, the suburban Republicans, did drift away. And I did think that hurt Republicans down ballot. I think now is the time to heal, whether you were Trump, never Trump. We have to unite because Virginia can be competitive when we have an inspiring message. In the 50th, I want to bring new ideas to the table. As a Republican, you can't just say lower taxes, lower taxes, lower taxes. That's not a compelling enough message. You need to really stress the severity that we have. If you are against socialism, if you are against defunding or abolishing the police, we have to turn in our own backyard. So what's happening nationally could happen nationally, but we have to look in our own backyard. Lee Carter is a direct threat to the Virginia way, and he's in the seat. He's in the House of Delegates. So we got to turn a spotlight on that.
So he's been successful in getting legislation passed, and most recently, his first term wasn't very successful at all, and slowly but surely getting more bills to the governor's desk and for signature. And he's focused a lot on labor unions and the right to work. He is a big fan of repealing right to work here in Virginia, a practice that has been in place since 1947. Do you think that that's a change? Do you think that's going to shape up to be another issue in this upcoming election? Or what are some of the key things? I mean, also on marijuana legalization.
Sure.
You know, the governor just announced this week that he plans to introduce legislation himself to get that adult use legalized. That's something that Carter pushed for recently in most recent session. And so what are the key issues that you see lining up between you and Lee Carter?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think the key issues for me is going to be education and public safety. So as a teacher, I do bring a different perspective to the table. Lee Carter's antics on Twitter, while he's busy doing that, we could be focusing on the fact that, number one, it is a statistical fact for the past 3 years that more people are moving out of Virginia than are moving in. Child care is one of the most expensive in the country. I believe, I forgot the source escapes me, but I believe it is just as expensive to send your child to George Mason as it is to pay for child care. These are issues that I think Republicans and Democrats can unite on, and especially Republicans trying to win back those suburban voters need to focus on this. In terms of teacher pay and tying in right to work, I'm a teacher. I have a slightly different perspective on right to work than a standard cookie cutter Republican. I do not believe it should be repealed, but it needs to be severely reformed. And I say that because as a teacher, for example, or whether you are a cop or fireman, our public safety is directly being attacked by those that want to defund and abolish the police. And in New York, we saw that because New York is a strong police union, they were able to bite back a little bit. And I don't believe you should completely take the teeth out of these organizations, especially our educators that deserve better and our public servants that deserve better. It's a libertarian view. I don't think personally the government should tell you who you should be allowed to organize with or not. So that's where I kind of come across, where the governor, it is a tradition right to work. However, as a teacher, I'm expected to work 24/7 around the clock, most of the time without pay. So there are certain things that, look, do I think you should be pressured to join a union? No, I don't think anybody should be pressured to do anything. However, I don't think the government should tell you your union shouldn't have teeth.
Let me ask you about Trump in Northern Virginia. There are a lot of Northern Virginia Republicans who want to be as far away from Donald Trump as possible because of the suburban mom factor. Suburban moms don't really go for Trump, and so they think that if they can differentiate themselves from Donald Trump, then they may have a shot at winning. But we've seen over the past 4 years that the Republicans who associate themselves with Trump do better in their respective races. There seems to be, and if you look at the number of Trump votes that were that he received on election day, he is pretty well liked amongst Republicans, conservatives. At least we'll say conservatives across the country. In Virginia, we sort of have a unique governor's race primary race shaping up with Amanda Chase, who some have described, I read this morning in the Chesterfield Observer, as Trump's female alter ego. And you have Kirk Cox, who is a more traditional Republican Speaker of the House before the Democrats took control in 2020 earlier this year.
Sure.
Where would you say your, I guess, temperament and personality and views line up? Which of these two candidates would you serve better under?
It's interesting. I mean, look, I'm from Long Island originally, New York. I'm actually from the same area as the president. So I definitely get his, I guess, let's call it the ability to shoot from the hip. And I believe everyone should be honest and outspoken. I think when it comes to our gubernatorial race, though, however, I think Amanda Chase, I think that's an insult to Trump, personally. I think Amanda Chase is a total clown. I think she's a complete fraud, and I think she is literally just trying to do with what Corey Stewart did, which was let me be as offensive as possible to generate as much press as possible. And I don't think
Corey Stewart, obviously the long time
yes.
Prince William County Board of Supervisors chairman, and ran multiple times failed campaigns
yes.
at both U.S. Senate for Virginia and for governor of Virginia.
The Republican Party is not going to win by embracing the Confederate flag and by yelling at police officers over a parking space when we claim to be pro-police. So Amanda Chase is completely off the table. Kirk Cox, I think he's a good guy. We're both teachers, right? So I think it's great. I think more educators need to be involved in the public sphere, especially Republican educators and conservative educators. There's a lot of us. And I think teachers are unfairly painted with, oh, liberal arts college, liberal teachers. That's not true. I believe a lot of the problems with public school is that conservative teachers feel like they can't speak up, and we are painted in a box. So Kirk Cox, of those two, obviously I would side with him. I am interested to see how the field shapes up. I mean, I've also read Pete Snyder might be jumping in, Denver Riggleman. So it's going to be a battle, but you could hear it from me. I do not think Amanda Chase represents the Trump wing very accurately, and I don't think she is any parallel to Donald Trump because she lacks any charisma and any likability factor whatsoever, in my personal opinion.
So going back to your the district that you're running for in the 50th, you've got an uphill climb, right?
Yeah.
And so should people who live in that district expect to see you popping up at their doorstep?
Yes.
Should people expect to hear you at events, at public meetings? As we look at a coronavirus vaccine around the corner, thank goodness it's ready, it's being produced, and hopefully shipped to our region very soon. What's your prospects in terms of campaigning, getting out the vote in 2021 as we sort of leave the pandemic and enter hopefully normalcy again?
Yeah, right. I expect for the Republicans, I want never Trump and Trump, those two sides to come together, because in Virginia, we can't afford to be apart. That's number one. I want to heal my party. Number two, I believe there's a space in my campaign for Democrats. I do not believe the average Democrat in Manassas or Prince William wants to see the police abolished. And the average working Democrat and Republican aren't on Twitter. I mean, me and you are news junkies. We're going to be checking Twitter. They're not. So they don't know what crazy, quite frankly, shit he's saying that's making their district look awful, or what life decisions he's about to alter in his legislation because he puts it out on Twitter. So I believe there is a space for common sense Democrats, whether you are black, white, Latino, they're gay, a member of the LGBTQIA community. You have a space with me because I am on the side of common sense. And another thing, we bring up Trump and the likability. Democrats can't call Trump out for irrational Twitter behavior when their own guy is their characterization of Trump on steroids. So they can't claim to be the party of healing and common sense as long as Lee Carter at the fold. And I'll tell you right now, there's a real divide in the Democrats between Spanberger and McAuliffe and Warner, that kind of common sense old school Democrat, and the Lee Carters. So I believe there is an opening like never before to remove Lee Carter from office, especially now that he is distracted. He's thinking about other things. He's thinking about governor. And I say let him move on. I got it from here. I know I'm not, you're right, I'm not a typical Republican. I am a public educator. I'm 28 years old. I'm in an interracial marriage. I do not I do not fit the mold of your traditional Republican candidate. I'm not rich. I'm a member of the working class. However, I believe all those things are advantages against Lee Carter.
We've seen a shift. The Democrats have shifted. The Republicans are now seen as more of a working class party.
Yes.
As the president on November 3rd did better with the minorities than any other presidential candidate in 60 years.
And Uriah, I would actually tie that back into right to work. I think right to work, the reason it needs to be reformed, if Republicans are embracing the working class. I mean, look, my family comes from Long Island. It was Republican, Democrat, pretty even, right? But everyone was working class. Everyone had a union job. That's kind of how I grew up. So that's why I don't think I think it deserves a second look. If we are, the Republicans are now the working class party. We're now a far more diverse party than we've ever been. I would argue in the past, 30 years? So these are things we need to embrace and capitalize on.
Let me ask you real quickly about, you brought up, and I forgot to ask you early on, you are married for
Yes.
how many years?
Since June.
Since June. Well, congratulations. Good for you.
Marriage, yes.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so I would assume that you don't have any children, but I will ask you just the same. Do you have any children?
No, not yet.
Good.
The coronavirus, the time of love and the time of COVID gives us time in our hands. So maybe soon.
Indeed. And then how can we find you online?
Yes. You can find me on Twitter at Micheal Allers Jr. Same handle for Instagram as well. For Facebook, Mike Allers Jr. And the website is votemikejr.com.
All right.